Ladies and gentlemen, entrepreneurs, dreamers, strategists, imagine for a moment that the foundation your world stands upon is cracking. The systems you depend on, money, trade, jobs, they're not just under stress. They are on the brink of collapse. You can feel it in rising prices, in unstable markets, in whispers of layoffs. Today, I bring you a prediction that few want to hear, but everyone needs to hear, because this isn't just another economic downturn. This isn't another bubble waiting to burst. This is a full-blown collapse where everything that we have built, depended upon, trusted in could fail, and it could happen sooner than you think. The signs are everywhere, and if you're paying attention, you can feel them in your gut. It starts small. The price of groceries that used to be predictable now shocks you every time you check out. The cost of fuel, of rent, of the basics you can't live without. It's creeping up faster than your income can keep up. That isn't just inflation, that's erosion. Erosion of purchasing power, erosion of stability, erosion of the quiet confidence that tomorrow will cost about the same as today. When that trust breaks, when people no longer believe their money will hold value, you're standing on the edge of something far more dangerous than a temporary spike. You're standing on the edge of collapse. Look beyond the shelves and into the numbers. Debt, corporate, government, household, is at historic highs. Every nation, every major company, every household has been living on borrowed time and borrowed money. Interest rates were kept at the floor for years, fueling expansion, speculation, risk-taking. But now rates are climbing, payments are ballooning, and suddenly what was manageable becomes suffocating. Families are defaulting on credit cards, businesses are delaying paychecks, and governments are taking on new loans just to service old ones. That's not growth. That's desperation disguised as normal. And history tells us clearly, when debt piles high enough, the smallest spark can bring it all down. Supply chains, the veins and arteries of our modern economy, are clogged. What used to be a seamless flow of goods across borders is now a web of delays, shortages, and rising costs. A single disruption in one region sends waves across continents. It's not just microchips or fuel, it's the everyday necessities, food, medicine, construction materials. The world was built on just-in-time systems, but now we're learning the hard truth. When there's no margin for error, every error is catastrophic. Businesses are scrambling, shelves are thinning, and consumers are left wondering why something so simple is suddenly scarce. Scarcity breeds panic, and panic breeds collapse faster than spreadsheets can capture. Layer onto this the uncertainty of geopolitics, wars that don't stay contained, sanctions that backfire, alliances that fracture. Every decision made on the global stage ripples into our daily lives. Energy costs spike because a pipeline shuts down. Currency values swing because of a political statement. Trade routes reroute. Contracts vanish. Entire markets destabilize overnight. And make no mistake, when leaders cannot predict stability in the next quarter, they retreat. They cut investments, they lay off workers, they protect themselves first. And that self-protection cascades into lost jobs, shrinking markets, and fragile economies breaking down at the edges. Technology, once the engine of growth, is showing its fragility. Massive layoffs in industries that were supposed to be future-proof are exposing the myth of endless demand. Startups that burned cash when capital was cheap are now closing their doors, unable to raise another round. Venture money has dried up. What was once called innovation now looks like excess. And in the fallout, we realize, when growth is built on hype instead of fundamentals, it collapses the moment the easy money disappears. Even the environment is signaling distress. Crops failing in unexpected regions, storms tearing apart infrastructure, droughts pushing food prices even higher. These aren't isolated events. They compound the fragility already in place. A bad harvest doesn't just mean higher prices, It means broken contracts, bankrupt farmers, disrupted exports, political unrest. When the environment rebels, it exposes how much we've built on the illusion of stability. Add all of this together, and you start to see the real picture. Rising costs eating into families' ability to spend, debt strangling governments and corporations alike, supply chains too fragile to withstand even minor shocks, geopolitical fractures widening into economic fault lines, technology hype cycles unraveling, environmental instability feeding volatility. These aren't separate stories. They are connected, feeding into one another, accelerating the same direction. And that direction is toward collapse, but here's the part most people miss. Collapse doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It doesn't announce itself with a siren. It creeps, it chips away at confidence. It builds quietly in boardrooms and living rooms. People adjust to higher prices, then to shortages, then to layoffs, until suddenly they wake up in a reality they no longer recognize. Collapse is slow, then sudden. By the time the majority sees it, the system is already broken. The signals are here now. You don't need to be an economist to feel them. You see them in your paycheck, in the market volatility, in the uncertainty of your employer, in the whispers of recession, in the reality that the comfort you once trusted feels less certain every month. That's not noise, that's a pattern screaming that the old normal is gone, and what comes next is not stability, but shock. And the greatest danger isn't even the collapse itself, it's the denial before it, the refusal to see what's directly in front of us, the comfort of thinking it's just temporary. That's how people get blindsided. That's how empires crumble while their leaders insist everything is fine. The indicators are not subtle, they are loud, glaring, undeniable. The real question is, are you listening? Every generation faces its share of economic storms. Markets go up, markets go down. Recessions come and go. People like to comfort themselves with the idea that we've been here before and we'll get through it again. But the truth is, what we're facing right now is not a repeat of the past. This is not the same story with a different cover. This is a crisis shaped by forces unlike anything we've ever seen before, and the reason it feels familiar is because we're looking for comparisons when the reality is we're entering uncharted territory. In the past, crises were mostly local or regional. A housing bubble in one country, a debt crisis in another. But today, the world is tied together by an invisible web of trade, technology, and capital flows. When one market shakes, the tremor isn't confined, it spreads instantly across continents. A bank collapse in one nation isn't a headline, it's a chain reaction. A drought in one region doesn't just hurt farmers there, it raises food prices everywhere. Globalization created efficiencies, yes, but it also created fragility. There is no insulation anymore. One crack anywhere in the system becomes everyone's problem, and then there's technology. In the past, economic pain spread slowly. Newspapers carried the stories, radio announced the downturn, people reacted over weeks and months. Now, a single post can spark a bank run in hours. A rumor on social media can wipe billions off markets before the regulators even wake up. Speed has become a weapon. Fear moves at the pace of Wi-Fi. This isn't just a faster version of the old cycles. It's a fundamentally different dynamic. The velocity of information multiplies the velocity of collapse. Debt is another piece of the puzzle. Yes, economies have always had debt, but never at this scale. Global debt has surpassed the size of the entire world's economy multiple times over. Governments owe more than they can tax. Corporations owe more than they can earn. Households owe more than they can save. In past crises, there was always some cushion, some ability to spend, some room to maneuver. Now that cushion is gone. Everyone has borrowed against tomorrow, and when tomorrow arrives, there's nothing left to give. That's why this isn't just another cycle, it's a breaking point. Geopolitics adds another layer of volatility. Once, the world had clear powers, clear rules, clear alliances. Today, it's fractured. Old agreements are dissolving, new tensions are rising, and trust is collapsing at the international level. Sanctions, tariffs, trade wars, each one is a spark, and the fuel is already stacked high. A miscalculation in one region can crash markets across the globe. Leaders aren't coordinating anymore. They're competing, retreating, defending their own corners. And when cooperation dies, stability dies with it. Add to that the environment. In the past, markets worried about oil shocks, maybe a drought or two, but now entire regions face climate-driven disruption. Crops fail in unexpected ways. Storms wipe out infrastructure. Water scarcity pushes entire populations to the brink, and these shocks don't reset. They pile up. One bad harvest drives food prices up, which drives political unrest, which fuels instability. The environment is no longer a background factor. It's an accelerator. Every disaster accelerates the cracks in an already fragile system. There's also the illusion of security in digital economies. People assumed that as long as money flowed online, as long as tech kept innovating, growth was endless. But we're learning that even the digital world is built on the same old fundamentals: trust, liquidity, demand. When consumers cut back, ads dry up, startups collapse, layoffs ripple through industries that were supposed to be invincible. And unlike factories which can restart slowly, digital markets collapse all at once. A platform loses confidence, investors pull funding, the company is gone overnight. It's volatility without warning. Another reason this moment is different. The social contract itself is under stress. In previous downturns, people trusted that governments and institutions had the tools to stabilize things. Central banks would step in, stimulus would flow, recovery would begin. But after years of interventions, printing money, bailing out corporations, people are questioning whether those tools even work anymore. Confidence in institutions is eroding, and when trust disappears, policy loses its power. That's not something we've seen at this scale before. A system without trust is a system without a foundation, and let's not forget psychology. In earlier crises, generations were conditioned to endure scarcity. They knew how to tighten belts, grow food, rely on family. Today, entire societies are built on consumption, on credit, on instant access. Take that away and you don't just have economic stress, you have identity crisis. People aren't prepared to adjust because they've never had to. That makes the collapse sharper, the panic deeper, the recovery slower. So why is this time different? Because all of these factors, global interconnectedness, digital speed, historic debt, fractured geopolitics, environmental shocks, fragile trust, and unprepared societies, are converging at once. Each one alone could trigger a downturn. Together, they're creating the conditions for something far more severe than the cycles we've studied in history books. This isn't just another correction, it's a collision of vulnerabilities, all hitting the system at the same time. The uncomfortable truth is this: we can't simply point to the past for guidance anymore. The 2008 playbook won't save us. The 1970s inflation playbook won't save us. The Great Depression playbook won't save us. Because the world has changed, the speed, the scale, the complexity. It's a different game now, and the people who keep pretending it's business as usual will be the first to fall when the cracks widen into chasms. What sets this moment apart is that the warning signs aren't hidden. They're out in the open, screaming at anyone willing to look. Prices rising, debt exploding, systems breaking down, trust evaporating. And still, too many cling to the hope that it always bounces back. Maybe it does, but maybe this time it doesn't bounce the same way. Maybe this time it breaks. The choice is simple: recognize the difference or get caught in denial. The ones who see clearly, who prepare for something fundamentally new, will have the chance not just to survive, but to lead. The ones who pretend this is just another storm will be swept away, because this isn't the old cycle repeating. This is the new world arriving, and the question is, are you ready for it? When an economic collapse begins, it doesn't strike everyone equally. It never has. Some people feel the tremors long before others even realize the ground is moving. And when the cracks widen, it's not the wealthy or the well-connected who get swallowed first. It's the people standing on the edge without protection, the ones already stretched thin, already exposed, already one paycheck or one shipment or one client away from disaster. That's who gets hit first and hardest. The middle class will be the first casualty. For years, they've carried the illusion of stability: a house with a mortgage, 2 cars on loans, kids in schools, maybe some retirement savings. On paper, it looks solid, but in reality, it's fragile, because stability built on debt is no stability at all. When prices rise and interest rates climb, those monthly payments become unmanageable. Credit cards get maxed out, savings evaporate, and suddenly the middle class isn't living comfortably anymore. They're fighting to stay afloat. And because they've been trained to consume, to maintain appearances, they often delay facing the reality until it's too late. By the time they cut spending, it's not by choice, it's by force. Small businesses will be next. These are the backbone of every community, but they run on razor-thin margins. They don't have the cash reserves of corporations, the bailout guarantees of big banks, or the global reach to balance one market against another. When consumers cut back, they feel it instantly. A neighborhood restaurant sees fewer tables filled. A family-run shop watches inventory sit unsold. Expenses stay the same, but revenue drops, credit dries up, and within months, sometimes weeks, what once was a dream and a livelihood becomes a locked door and a for sale a sign. Startups and freelancers who thrived in the boom times will also be exposed. The gig worker who relied on constant demand, the consultant who depended on companies spending freely, the entrepreneur fueled by venture capital. All of them face a brutal reality when money tightens. Companies cut outside contracts first. Investors hold their cash. Consumers skip the luxuries. What once felt like independence suddenly feels like vulnerability, because when the flow of work dries up, there's no safety net. Emerging markets around the globe will feel the pain sharper than developed economies. They depend on exports, foreign investments, and loans from international institutions. When global demand slows, their factories go quiet. When investors pull out, their currencies crash. When debt payments come due, they don't have the reserves to cover them. That triggers inflation, political instability, sometimes even social unrest. The people in these markets often live closer to the edge already. Less savings, less infrastructure, fewer options. So the impact isn't just financial, it's existential. Workers in vulnerable industries are next in line. Hospitality, retail, travel, entertainment, any sector that relies on discretionary spending will collapse quickly when wallets tighten. The waiter, the flight attendant, the retail clerk, they lose hours first, then jobs altogether. And these workers are often living paycheck to paycheck. They don't have the luxury of weathering long periods of unemployment. One missed paycheck leads to overdue bills. 1 month of unemployment leads to eviction notices. Even white-collar professionals who thought they were insulated will discover they aren't safe. Tech workers already learned this lesson as layoffs spread through companies that once seemed untouchable. Corporate jobs that looked secure vanish when balance sheets shrink. Middle management is often the first cut, too expensive to keep, too replaceable to fight for. And with hundreds of resumes flooding every opening, the illusion of job security dissolves. For the first time, people who thought they were immune realize they're standing on the same shaky ground as everyone else. The hardest hit, though, will always be those already vulnerable before the collapse. Families in poverty who spend every cent they earn on survival. People in developing nations where food and medicine are already scarce. Communities living under unstable governments. For them, a rise in food prices or a disruption in supply chains isn't an inconvenience, it's life-threatening. And when the collapse ripples outward, it amplifies existing inequality. Those at the bottom suffer the most because they have the least buffer, but it's not just individuals. Institutions crumble too. Local governments dependent on tax revenues suddenly face shortfalls. Social services that people rely on, health, care, education, safety nets, become strained or underfunded. Nonprofits that depend on donations see their funding vanish. Communities that were already struggling lose the very systems meant to support them. The result is not just economic pain, but a breakdown of trust, of stability, of the social fabric itself. What makes this even more devastating is the psychological toll. When collapse hits the first wave of people, the rest of society sees it happening in real time. They watch their neighbors lose jobs, their favorite shops close, their friends sell their homes. Fear spreads faster than facts, and that fear becomes contagious. People stop spending, stop investing, stop taking risks. That fear accelerates the collapse, pulling even those who might have been stable into the downward spiral. And let's be clear, while the wealthy are not immune, they have buffers. Assets to sell, investments to shift, lawyers and advisors to protect them. They will feel losses, yes, but they will not feel them first. They will feel them last. It's always the people with the least margin, the least leverage, the least power, who absorb the initial shock. That's the brutal truth of collapse. It doesn't start at the top, it starts at the bottom, and it works its way upward. The pattern is consistent, and it's unfolding right now. Those living paycheck to paycheck, those running small operations, those depending on fragile systems, they will be hit first and hardest. And once the collapse takes hold there, it spreads outward until no one is untouched. That's the reality that so many refuse to see. Collapse doesn't begin with billionaires losing billions. It begins with ordinary people losing everything. Collapse doesn't arrive with a single dramatic event. It creeps in quietly, then all at once, reshaping life until the familiar feels like a distant memory. What it looks like is a world where the basic assumptions you've built your life on no longer hold true. The paycheck that once covered your bills doesn't stretch. The store that once had everything you needed now has empty shelves. The bank account you thought was safe suddenly feels uncertain. Collapse isn't abstract. It's lived, it's visible, it's painful in everyday details. The first signs will show up in the simplest places. Prices. Inflation won't just nibble at the edges, it will devour food, fuel, rent, medicine. All the non-negotiables spiral upward. A basket of groceries that once cost 50 now costs 70, then 100. Families start cutting back, not on luxuries but on necessities. Parents choose between heating their homes or feeding their kids. People who once planned vacations now wonder how to afford the gas to get to work. Inflation isn't just numbers on a chart. It's the daily squeeze that pushes households to the brink. Then comes unemployment. Companies slash costs when demand falters. Layoffs begin quietly, often in industries that looked untouchable. Tech firms cut tens of thousands. Retail stores close locations. Restaurants can't survive higher costs and shrinking customers. Every wave of layoffs ripples outward. When one person loses their job, they stop spending, which causes another business to lose revenue, which leads to more cuts. Soon entire communities feel hollowed out, with boarded up shops and neighborhoods weighed down by stress. Banking systems, once trusted, begin to show their cracks. A rumor of instability spreads online, and in hours customers rush to withdraw funds. Lines form at ATM, branches run dry, accounts are frozen for stability. Confidence in banks is fragile, and once it's gone, the system breaks. Even those who thought their savings were safe suddenly realize their access to cash isn't guaranteed. When trust in banks evaporates, society's financial backbone collapses with it. Crisis always hits currencies. The value of money itself becomes questionable. In some places, local currencies fall against global benchmarks, wiping out purchasing power overnight. In others, printing presses run nonstop, creating more bills but less value. People carry stacks of cash that buy less and less each week. Black markets emerge as alternatives, bartering rises as confidence falls. The idea that a piece of paper or a digital number guarantees value starts to look like a dangerous illusion. Shortages compound the suffering. Supply chains break under stress, leaving essential items unavailable. Shelves that once overflowed with choice stand half empty. Medicines that were routine become scarce. Energy supplies strain, leading to rolling blackouts or skyrocketing bills. Even the basics, rice, bread, milk, can vanish, sparking panic buying, hoarding, and sometimes outright violence. Scarcity doesn't just test patience, it tests civility. Communities turn tense. Trust between neighbors erodes when survival feels personal. Governments, pressured by the weight of crisis, scramble. Some print more money, worsening inflation. Others raise taxes, burdening those already struggling. Promises of stimulus checks or relief programs collapse under bureaucracy or corruption. Public services falter, hospitals lack supplies, schools cut staff, police and fire departments run on skeleton crews. The very institutions people rely on for order show their weakness, deepening the sense that no one is in control. Social fabric begins to tear. When people can't feed their families, crime rises. Theft increases, not from malice, but desperation. Protests erupt, sometimes peaceful, often not. Cities experience unrest as frustration turns into rage. Political divisions widen, leaders exploit fear, and trust in authority dissolves. The idea of community, of working together, starts to fragment. People retreat inward, hoard resources, guard themselves. Where there was cooperation, there is suspicion. The collapse also shows up in mental health. Anxiety, depression, hopelessness spread like contagions. When the future feels uncertain, when effort feels futile, people withdraw. Addiction rises, suicides increase. The invisible wounds of collapse run deeper than the visible ones, and they linger longer. Economic crises aren't just about money, they're about human resilience breaking under relentless pressure. For many, collapse means downward mobility. Families that once thought of themselves as middle class wake up broke. Retirement savings vanish. College dreams evaporate. People downsize not by choice, but by necessity, moving into smaller homes, then shared spaces, then government shelters if things get bad enough. Pride dissolves in the face of survival. What once was taken for granted, 3 meals a day, a safe place to sleep, becomes uncertain, and yet collapse is uneven. While millions suffer, a small group thrives, those with cash reserves, assets that hold value, or the foresight to prepare see opportunity where others see ruin. They buy homes at distressed prices. They scoop up businesses sold for pennies. They expand influence while the majority shrinks. This creates a brutal divide. The few rise higher while the many fall lower. Inequality, already sharp, becomes a canyon. What does collapse look like? It looks like a society that no longer trusts its money, its leaders, its neighbors, or its future. It looks like families scrambling for food, workers desperate for jobs, governments flailing for answers, and institutions crumbling under the weight of expectations they can't meet. It looks like anger in the streets and fear in the home. It looks like hope draining out of people's eyes as they realize the safety net they counted on was just a mirage. Collapse isn't a movie scene or a single moment in history. It's a slow unraveling that suddenly feels like freefall. It's the day you realize the old world isn't coming back. It's the shock of watching everything that seemed permanent dissolve into uncertainty. And for those who aren't prepared, it's devastating. But for those who see it coming, it's not just an ending, it's a reset. A painful, brutal reset that clears the field for those willing to endure the storm and build something new from the rubble. Preparation in times of crisis isn't about panic, it's about positioning. The truth is, collapse doesn't just destroy, it clears the board. And while most people freeze, waiting for someone else to fix things, a few are moving, adapting, and building. Those few turn disaster into opportunity. The question is, which side will you be on? The first step is protection. Before you think about growth, you have to make sure you don't get wiped out. That means cutting unnecessary debt, especially the kind that bleeds you every month without creating value. High interest loans, credit cards, luxury financing, these are anchors in rough waters. Eliminate them. The leaner you are, the stronger you stand. At the same time, build a buffer. Cash, savings, reserves. Something liquid that buys you time when the world around you stalls. Too many people underestimate how valuable 3 to 6 months of survival cash is. When jobs disappear and banks wobble, that buffer isn't just comfort, it's power. Next, diversify your streams of income. Depending on one paycheck, one client, or one source is gambling, not strategy. The collapse will expose the fragility of single points of failure. Build side hustles, freelancing, digital products, skills you can monetize online. Start small but build consistently. Think of income like legs of a table. One can break, but if you have 4 or 5, the table still stands. And don't dismiss opportunities just because they're small today. Some of the biggest fortunes of tomorrow will be born from side projects people built in the shadows of crisis. Investing during collapse looks different. Traditional safe assets may not be safe anymore. The stock market will be volatile, governments will print money, and currencies may devalue. That's why you need to focus on resilience. Hard assets, land, commodities, businesses that meet basic needs. Hold value even when paper promises collapse. Some will look to gold, silver, or other hedges. Others will find opportunity in digital assets. What matters is not chasing hype, but choosing stores of value that can't be destroyed by inflation or wiped out by a single policy decision. Skill building is an overlooked form of investment. In crisis, assets can be lost, money can vanish, but skills travel with you. The person who knows how to market, how to code, how to negotiate, how to sell, those are irreplaceable advantages. Every collapse in history has created demand for people who can solve problems, move products, build systems, and lead others. While most waste time scrolling and complaining, sharpen your skills. Learn things that make you valuable regardless of the environment. You don't just survive with skills. You thrive. Mindset becomes the hidden weapon. Collapse breaks people not just financially but mentally. They give up, they freeze, they panic. The ones who win are the ones who see opportunity in chaos. Every closed business leaves a gap. Every market crash leaves undervalued assets. Every shift in consumer behavior creates new demand. You have to train yourself to look at problems differently, not as walls, but as doors. If you let fear drive, you'll miss the openings. But if you step back and stay disciplined, you'll see what others can't. Community is another layer of preparation most ignore. People think collapse is an individual game, but it's not. Lone wolves get picked off. Those with networks, trusted allies, communities, they survive and rebuild faster. This could be family, friends, business partners, online groups of like-minded people. Build real connections. Trade skills, share resources, collaborate. In collapse, trust becomes currency, and relationships become the infrastructure that holds people up when systems fail. Another strategy, think offense, not just defense. Most will only try to preserve what they have, but the smart ones are positioning for growth. When businesses fail, assets are sold for pennies. When real estate markets crash, properties change hands for fractions of their past value. When industries collapse, new industries emerge. The entrepreneurs who step in at the right time will not just survive, they'll create generational wealth. History shows it clearly. Depressions mint millionaires, but only for those who had the courage to move when others froze. Flexibility is also non-negotiable. If you cling to the old ways, you'll break with them. The collapse will shift how people work, spend, communicate, and live. Those who adapt, whether that means working remotely, starting digital, first businesses, downsizing lifestyle, or relocating, will move ahead while others get stuck. Rigidity kills in crisis, adaptability wins. And never underestimate the power of discipline. In collapse, temptation is everywhere. Panic buying, chasing hype investments, blaming others. Discipline means sticking to strategy, spending less when everyone else is consuming out of fear. Buying when everyone else is selling, staying calm when the noise is deafening. Discipline is what separates those who get swept away from those who build while others crumble. So what does preparation look like in action? It looks like a family with no debt, 6 months of cash, and multiple income streams. It looks like an entrepreneur watching markets tank and seeing undervalued businesses to acquire. It looks like a young professional sharpening digital skills while others complain about layoffs. It looks like people forming networks of trust, trading resources, and lifting each other. It looks like confidence, not fear, in the middle of collapse. Because here's the truth, collapse is inevitable. It comes for every empire, every system, every economy. But collapse doesn't have to mean your collapse. It can be the breaking of the old and the birth of the new. The ones who prepare now will step into that new world not as victims, but as leaders. They'll see opportunity where others see ruin. They'll build wealth while others lose it. They'll rise, not despite the storm, but because of it. And that's the difference between those who get crushed and those who transform. Collapse isn't just the end, it's the reset. It's the chance to rewrite the rules, to reposition yourself, to claim ground while others retreat. Preparation isn't about fear. It's about making sure that when the old system crumbles, you're already standing on the foundation of the new one. That's how you turn collapse into opportunity. That's how you rise while everything else falls. So what if everything collapses? What if the pillars we once took for granted crumble? Remember this, collapse is painful. But collapse is also fertile ground for new empires. The old systems die and the bold, the agile, the prepared rise. I challenge you today, don't wait. Don't hope someone else fixes it. Become the leader in your life. Become the CEO of your future. From zero to CEO isn't just a slogan, it's your blueprint in crisis. Do this work now, so when the storm hits, you're not scrambling, you're already rising, because when everything else falls, what remains is character. What remains is vision. What remains is those who refuse to be victims and choose instead to build even amid collapse. Thank you. Stay sharp. stay ready, and rise above.